Welcome to Above Replacement Radio. I am your host, Chris Gianta. I might be becoming a bad baseball fan who can't enjoy the romantic things because of advanced statistics. 15 years from now, I want to be on the early baseball committee. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran.
I literally have the Fangraphs hoodie, the baseball reference t-shirt, just repping some stats, you know what I'm saying?
It's not necessarily Hall of Fame. It's not necessarily above average, but we can guarantee you we are better than just the standard replacement level college sophomore.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. The end of the regular season is upon us. It's even kind of passed. Yesterday was game 162 for every team not named the Mets and the Marlins, but postseason baseball is upon us. It is October 2nd today, a day past the 4-year anniversary of Above Replacement Radio, and for the 5th time on the show, we will be talking about the wild card game/series.
Yes, quite a bit has happened or changed since we started doing this. 4 years ago, to the date of yesterday. So yeah, cheers to us keeping it going. But yeah, it's the playoff bracket is set. Some things changed from last episode to this episode. I mean, there's a new AL West leader and therefore new AL West champion.
Not really a new AL West champion.
Yeah, it is it's the same AL West champion, but they were not in first place the last time we talked, which was about 48 hours ago. The Astros win the AL West. Props to them. They went out and swept the D-backs. Rangers lost a series to the Mariners.
Yeah, the Astros played a heck of a series against the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks pitching actually looked really good on Friday and Saturday. Gallen went out there and shoved. Merrill Kelly went out there and shoved on Saturday. I believe Ryan Nelson pitched yesterday, but and they did come alive, that offense. But the Astros pitching stepped up. They limited the Diamondbacks with runners in scoring position. Jeremy Pena made a game-saving defensive play on, I believe it was Friday, which was big because the Astros were, they were playing for something up until game 162, which is odd, not something we're used to. And you know what? They came through when they needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I realized as I was putting notes together for, the playoff preview of these next 4 series is I did not realize how big that division win was going to be just based on matchups and how it lines up, because the 2 seed, which was going to be the AL West winner no matter what, the 2 seed, right now they get the winner of Blue Jays Twins. The 5 seed gets the Rays.
Who then has to play the Orioles if they win.
Yeah, and then you have to play the Orioles. So the difference for the Astros winning, they went from having to face the Rays, then potentially Orioles, to having, the first series off and then facing the winner of Blue Jays Twins. I mean, that is really ideal for the Astros or whoever was going to win that AL West.
Shout out to the Blue Jays for tanking for the 6th seed.
Yes.
I mean, you don't want that path where you got to take on the Rays and then Blue Jays. And then, if the Rangers won yesterday, you could have avoided the Astros until the ALCS then.
Yeah, right.
Which I guess, to be fair, they're gonna avoid the Astros they'd have to face the Astros in the ALDS. But yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I guess we didn't know it heading into game 162 because we thought, maybe the Blue Jays were going to be that 5 seed because it was possible. But yeah, they lost and they take the 6 seed, which is ideal. I think everybody out there would rather face, the Twins than the Rays. However the seeding may work, that's the case. You're facing an 87 win team over a 99 win team. That's MLB playoffs. So yeah, I mean, Blue Jays got a bit lucky there. Astros took advantage of the opportunity and get that bye and get the winner of Blue Jays Twins, where the Rangers, I mean, like this might go into my prediction a little bit, but the Rangers unfortunately are in a pretty bad spot, having to come off a road trip and go into Tampa Bay to face a 99-win team who has all their starters rested.
in a best of 3 series nonetheless.
Yes.
Like the wild card series, I think is so brutal, and I think this will also get into my predictions, but uh, like when you play 162 games and then you play another one and you lose that one, and all of a sudden your season's on the line. Like I think it just does stuff to teams mentally because since 2020 we've seen 12 best of 3 wild card series, and only 3 of them have gone to a decisive game 3. There have been 9 sweeps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, having to play in this series is, I mean, if it's a close race between you and the other team, like it's tough.
It is very tough. It is very tough. And especially like, the teams that didn't really have much to play for, which also includes the Twins heading into this week, they are at a supreme advantage because you have to have teams going out there with their number 3 starter, unfortunately for them,
Yep.
To start a series, which is not ideal. Whereas, the teams that didn't, really have much to play for, they are at a pretty supreme advantage. And I think that's very much exemplified with like the Rays,
Yep.
especially
Yeah,
a
no.
team, not a lot of pitching depth there, starting wise.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I mean, anything more to get into about this past weekend before or outside of the player departures and stuff?
No, I mean, the Mariners missed the playoffs is very disappointing. Obviously, I think it's a team that a lot of people wanted to see in October. But a lot just went wrong. You can point to the fact that they went 4-6 over this final 10-game span with Julio Rodriguez hitting 111. But in the grand scheme of things, like you got to look at the games they lost in April and May because they were a 500 team for a while. Um, and ultimately, when you miss the playoffs by 2 games, it's easy. It's easier to think about the games you lose in September than it is the games you lose in April and May. And the Mariners lost a lot of games in April and May. Someone pulled up on Twitter. I think it was like their lineup from like the 4th game of the season. Um, and it's stuff like that where if they had more guys ready at the beginning of the season, if they committed more to their offense, we could be talking about the playoff Mariners right now.
Yeah, I mean, they were 38-42 through the end of June. 38
Yeah,
and 42 through the end of June.
that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, like you can't, as a team, and it's not like the Mariners planned this, but as a team, you can't set yourself up for a comeback every time. I mean, this happened to them in 2022 as well, and it worked out for them. They were hot enough to make the playoffs and eventually win a playoff series, but they didn't get in that comfortably. They were, I don't know, like a few games ahead of the competition, but it worked out for them. Whereas, this year, like it was crazy competition. The fact that an 88-win team in this playoff format doesn't make the playoffs is pretty surprising, especially considering the records we saw in the NL. But
Yeah.
that's the way it shook up, and we knew the AL was going to be competitive with the playoff races, and unfortunately, when you start out so poorly or just plain old average for the first 3 months of the year, it's going to hurt you in the end.
Yeah. Cal Raleigh made some comments after the game. I don't know if you saw this, but he kind of talked about how like they needed to commit more to the offense and make moves, whether it have been at the deadline during the offseason. And pretty much every player was like, yeah, I agree with him. So it really sounds like Jerry Dipoto is under some pressure this offseason, whether it be to re-sign Teoscar Hernandez, to bring in some new bats, because I think the pitching staff and the bullpen, you know, are a strong suit in the team right now. Obviously, it wouldn't hurt to make additions if you can, but there's a clear priority for the Mariners this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like if they were to make the playoffs, they would have been one of the weaker lineups within the bunch.
Mm-hmm.
They would have been they would have been a team that relied on like timing and clutch hitting, which is kind of what they did. Which is kind of what they did last postseason. But yeah, I remember last postseason, like after they went off on Verlander, in game one of the ALDS, that offense kind of shut down. And yeah, I mean, as an offense this year, they weren't really that much better. They made some additions. Unfortunately, some of them didn't work out. Like, Colton Wong was a huge flop, unfortunately. Like, no one really expected that. I complimented the move. I thought it was very productive, especially getting Winker out of there. But unfortunately, like, I was trying to look for where Seattle ranked in like the second base department, um, in offensive stats. I mean, they were 22nd in second base weighted runs created plus. So, that was unfortunate. That put them behind. And yeah, I should look at where they rank overall in like runs scored and weighted runs created plus and all that.
AJ Pollock ended up being a dud. 138 plate appearances this year, a 53 OPS plus. That's not going to cut it. Even if he wasn't going to be, he hasn't been a league average bat since 2021. But, I mean, even then, if he had an 88 weighted runs created plus, that would have been sufficient, or at least a lot more sufficient than 53.
Right.
That's about 100 points of OPS in difference.
Yeah. So actually, Seattle was ninth in weighted runs created plus, but that is park adjusted, and OPS has them at 16th in the league. So more middle of the pack when you take away the park adjustments. So you consider that what you will. I think they have a decent amount of financial flexibility. They have enough depth in both the bullpen and starting rotation to kind of not prioritize that over the offseason. So, we'll see about it. I think, some more power out of the outfield, and some more, something out of second base might help them out. But, I'm sure Dipoto will have something surprising for us.
Yeah, I mean, they did fold in September, but ultimately you got to think back more to April and May than you do any other month for the Mariners.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that. Like, it is easy to just use what recently happened to define the season, but it was really the first 3 months of the year. All right, so I guess that leads into a segment we haven't done before.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's good reflection, because I think most just sports shows don't have this type of reflection on, like, what did we get wrong, what did we get right, and we're not going to go over every single prediction that we made, because we made a lot of them, but we're just going to go over 3 narratives. Do you want to just go into it real quick?
Yeah, so we're going to go with 3 narratives of ours that were correct and incorrect this year. So, before the season, we obviously made our predictions. We had our thoughts about various teams, various players, various things without the league, or throughout the league rather. And we obviously watched it all play out over the last 6 months, and things changed. Some things we were vindicated on. So I think we're just going to be talking about some things that we said this year, before this year, that turned out to be correct, and things that we were wrong on. So I think we should start with 3 narratives that we got right. I'll go first with my first one. This one goes back to one of my players to watch, a guy who maybe doubled down on the things that I said about him early in the season. Andre Pallante remains the most unique pitcher in baseball when it comes to batted ball data. Andre Pallante, if you don't know, is a reliever for the St. Louis Cardinals. On the surface, his stats don't look fantastic. He had a 4.76 ERA this year. Did give up a lot of hard contact at times, but he has a very interesting batted ball profile, in which last year he had a 65% ground ball rate. And the thing that was so unique about him was that he did it with a 4-seam fastball. Anytime you see a guy with with a lot of ground balls, it's usually a guy with a sinker, a guy with a cutter even. Almost never is it a 4-seam fastball as their primary pitch. And Pallante's fastball had a negative 10-degree average launch angle in 2022. Well, this year, he bumped it up a mile per hour. He added 1 mile per hour to his fastball, and his launch angle against it was negative 17. He had a 77% ground ball rate this year, a 7.1% fly ball rate. Both of those overwhelmingly the highest and lowest in baseball. A sweet spot rate of 19.5%. That's unheard of. An average launch angle of 11.6 degrees, a negative 11.6 degrees, excuse me. So he was really awesome to watch this year, and everything that I was so fascinated about him by this year, he doubled down on. So my first narrative that I got right was Andre Palante's uniqueness with his ground balls and his fastball.
Yeah, we love to see that, and I'm so happy, genuinely happy you got to see the Josh Bell versus Andre Palante
Yes.
matchup, and that you got to see Andre Palante twice in 1 year as a guy who went to like mostly American League ballparks, if I'm not mistaken.
Two American League ballparks to see him, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you saw him at
Yep.
two American League ballparks.
Yep.
Shout out to the new schedule. We get to see Andre Palante more.
Shout out to the new schedule,
Yeah,
honestly. I'm kind of a fan after 1 year.
it's not bad. Like either 18 interleague games or 46 interleague games, I'm fine with. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean it was pretty cool. I mean, checked a couple teams off the list on teams I haven't seen this year
Yeah.
in person.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, went to a new ballpark, which is cool. So
I went to four
my
new ballparks.
first yeah, my first narrative, yeah, Daniel checked off a bunch. I think like
Hmm.
five or something.
Yep.
A lot of them. My first narrative I'll get into is I like the Braves domination. Like I was really high on the Braves this year. I had them, winning the NL East and also taking the 1 seed, and I was very adamant about it. And there was a reason why I had them as World Series winners. Heading into this year, I was really high on them. I went back to listen to our predictions episode, and I listened to what I said on the Braves, and much of what I said came true. I said Acuna, and Olsen are due to bounce back or are due to progress and improve their numbers. I didn't expect it to that degree. I'll tell you that I didn't expect Acuna to be, an a runaway MVP candidate and Olsen to hit 54 home runs, but that was one of the things I said. I could see an innings jump from Spencer Strider. Spencer Strider threw 180 innings, had one of the best FIPS in baseball. Unfortunately, his ERA trailed a little bit, but he was still one of the most productive players in baseball this year. And along with that, um, and and yeah, I predicted Austin Riley as MVP. That's not going to come true, but he was one of the best third basemen in baseball this year. And yeah, I think with how adamant I was about the Braves being good, they totally came in spades with that. It finished with what 104 or 105 victories.
Something like
But
that.
overwhelmingly, best record in baseball this year, at least by a few games. So that's something I was right about. Not everybody had the Braves winning the NL East, but uh, I had them as a 1 seed, and happy about that. What is your second correct narrative?
So my second correct narrative, this is not exactly a very fun one because it vindicates something negative I said about a team, but the Royals development from last year wasn't enough, and it might be all we have, which is very unfortunate. A lot of people like the Royals as a sneaky, maybe a sleeper team, a team that could find its way to 75, 80 wins. I had them finishing last in the AL Central, uh, and they obviously went, I believe, 56 and 105 or something like that, 57, 105. They lost a lot of games, and they finished. They were competing with the Oakland A's at times for worst record in the league, and that's a team that was actively trying to lose. But it does suck how it happened because a lot of the guys that we hoped would take steps forward this year really didn't, with the exception of Bobby Witt Jr. He did put up a 120 OPS plus this year with plus defense and base running, which is exciting. But Vinny Pasquantino unfortunately hit the 60-day IL in June and never came back. But even when he was out there, he had a 108 OPS plus. Nick Prado did not take a step forward. MJ Melendez did have some tough luck with his expected numbers compared to his on the surface numbers, but ultimately he remained a below average hitter by OPS plus. Brady Singer did not take the step forward that we hoped he would after last year. Um, and we did end up seeing a couple interesting pieces towards the end of the season with Cole Reagans, with Michael Garcia, with Edward Olivares, and who was the other guy they got? Oh, Nelson Velasquez. Guys that were interesting, but the team still has one of the worst farm systems in baseball. And I think my fears preseason are pretty correct in that the development we saw from the Royals last year is kind of all that's coming. We look at the Orioles last year, and it's like, they have all this young talent, and there's more coming. You can't really say that with the Royals,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is,
yeah, for sure.
it's a team that's had a lot of early draft picks that they just have not hit on. Uh, and yeah, I don't know. It is very concerning what the long term picture looks like for this franchise, especially with how deep they already are in the rebuild.
Right, right. Yeah, and I was someone who had them ahead of the Tigers, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I understood being low on them, but I'm like, hey, they could have some, some guys in their second year who keep developing, and that did happen with Bobby Witt Jr., but that didn't happen with everybody.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, obviously, just too many holes in that roster, and it led to a pretty disastrous season. And yeah, I mean, things look very, very bleak in Kansas City, from a baseball perspective. So yeah, uh, so my second correct narrative, it revolves around a player. I've talked about him in my Twitter bio now. And it is the idea of Jose Ramirez being better than Manny Machado and Nolan Arenado. I would say, like, I think I still think he's the best third baseman in baseball, although I think it's debatable. But I think it's not debatable right now of who's better between him, Nolan Arenado, and Manny Machado. Arenado and Machado both had down years. Jose Ramirez kept doing what he does. He had a 5-win season, and that was technically a sort of a down year for him. But he still
Yeah,
had
I
a
was gonna
2020.
say.
Yeah, he still had a 5-win season on both websites. He had a productive defensive year. He had a 2020 season yet again. 2020, he's had a 2020 season every year since 2018, except for the shortened COVID year, and he's the only player to do that. And yeah, he kept my narrative. I'm very adamant about Jose Ramirez being the best third baseman in baseball. I think it's debatable right now between him and Austin Riley. I'd still put Ramirez over Riley, but I would understand the arguments for Riley. But I think my narrative of him being better than Arenado and Machado was definitely held pretty firm here, because I thought he was the best third baseman in the league coming in, and he was tied with Riley for best best F4 among third basemen this year. So happy he continues succeeding. Hope he gets the recognition at some point. What do you got for the third narrative?
For my third narrative, I wasn't too adamant about this in preseason, but it was definitely mentioned, and man, do I feel vindicated on it. The shift ban would be the least impactful of the three major rule changes. I think it kind of goes without saying that the shift ban was the least impactful. I mean, the pitch clock decreased the average time of game by about like 30 minutes or so, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Um, the number of the stats are all over there, all out there where it's like, the average time of game is lower, the number of 3-hour games is much lower, the number of 2-hour 30-minute or less games is much higher. There was like 3 sub 2-hour games this year, something like that. um yeah, it felt very clear that the pitch clock maybe was the most impactful, but the bigger, I'm looping in the bigger bases and the pickoff rule together, because they kind of go with each other. But stolen bases obviously went up this year. We had 1,000 different players setting records based on stolen bases. Where like Esteury Ruiz broke the AL rookie stolen base record. Ronald Acuna went 40-70. Bobby Witt Jr. went like 30 and 50 or something like that. Or maybe not 30 and 50, but like he had a
It was
lot of
30
big
and
home run and power season.
Yeah, it was 30 and
Uh,
49 at some point. I forget if he got to 50 or
yeah, he
not.
was like one away, right? Something like
Yeah.
that. Corbin Carroll became the first rookie to have like 25 home runs and 50 steals. Um, like stolen bases were way up this year. The stolen bases per game was at its highest point since 1997 this year. So the impact on that might be the most clear. I mean, between the pitch clock and the bigger bases and the pickoff rule, I think those two were incredibly impactful. You saw it every single day. The shift ban, no one really paid that much attention to. The league BABIP on pulled ground balls by lefties went up from, yes, 147 last year to 180 this year. That is a 30-point increase, but it was 189 in 2017. Like, it still isn't a crazy amount. A 180 BABIP still isn't very good, even if it is better than 147. The league batting average overall went up by a total of 5 points over last year, and it went down 4 points from 2019. So, I mean, I think we are able to keep the narrative that the shift ban was they're the least impactful uh, rule change.
Yep, yep. Yeah, stolen bases per team per team game went from 0.51 to 0.72.
Yeah,
League batting average on ground balls in general went from 241 to 248. You asked me as an over under 250 average on ground balls this year, and I said 250 or over, and yeah, I was wrong about that.
yeah, but it
It
was a good line.
it was a yeah, like it was a good odds
2
maker
points
right
off.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my third narrative unfortunately is negative. Um and and yeah, I mean no one wanted to see it happen, but it's my continued non-belief in the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Unfortunately for them, they continued to lose and disappoint a lot of people. Not to the fault of Shohei Ohtani, obviously, not really to the fault of Mike Trout. He got hurt, but I didn't mean to get hurt, obviously. And Daniel, you're very high on the Angels, but you're not the only one. I mean, a lot of people had them as a playoff team this year.
Yeah.
I looked at some preseason columns and preseason stuff. Five out of six CBS sports writers had the Angels in their playoffs, and also Fangraphs gave the Angels the second best playoff odds in the American League West, behind the Astros, and ahead of the Rangers and Mariners. And yeah, I did not buy in. I had them in fourth place this year. At the trade deadline, I did not think it was a good move to buy. And I was proven correct throughout time. Unfortunately, it's not something I really wanted to see, but there is a little bit of vindication there, because they did not. Yeah, they didn't really. They weren't even exciting at the end. Unfortunately, they
No.
completely collapsed. So yeah, my continued non-belief in the Angels paid off, and I was proven correct in that standpoint.
This kind of goes back. I mean, I didn't write this for a narrative I got right, but something that proved true again this year was I made a joke in the offseason that every year the Angels play the try not to believe in this team game. And like, there was reason to think that team was going to be a playoff team in April. Not only do they have Trout and Otani, but they added Brandon Drury, who everyone was excited about, and he, to his credit, performed fine this year. Hunter Renfroe, they hoped would do better. He didn't. They added Tyler Anderson, who was bad. Reed Demers didn't take a step forward this year. Patrick Sandoval didn't take a step forward this year. Jose Suarez was out of the rotation by May. I mean, like, the bullpen was terrible during the time when they needed them. Um, yeah, I mean, they added Gio Urshela as well. He was out of the lineup for most of the season. Taylor Ward got hurt. Um, Anthony Rendon got hurt, and that's a whole saga in itself. Um, Honestly, this whole season might have just ended the day that Artie Moreno decided he wasn't selling.
Yeah, it just seems that energy just seems to keep up there, unfortunately. Yeah. And yeah, like a lot of guys in the rotation disappointed. I was like, when I said they were a fourth place team, I said it's not because of their rotation, but part of why they tanked, unfortunately, was their rotation. Tyler Anderson went from getting Cy Young votes last year to being a very unproductive pitcher. Patrick Sandoval had a sub-3 ERA last year, was not good this year. Yeah, so there were some things also that I wasn't accounting for that happened, unfortunately, with Los Angeles. And now we will move on to the incorrect narratives, which are, objectively, they're funnier to talk about. So that's why anytime we do hits and flops, we'll end with the flops, because it's just funny, because we're self-proclaimed, we like to think we're smart, but sometimes things get proven wrong. What is the first thing you want to talk about that you got wrong this season?
This was a narrative that I had more after 2022 than I did going into 2023, and it was true at the time. But I mean, it's just outright wrong now that the Marlins weren't making the right moves through free agency and trades, because when you look at 2022, the Marlins added Jorge Soler, they added Jacob Stallings through trade, they added Joey Wendell through trade, they added Avisel Garcia through free agency, and all of those flopped spectacularly. The best one was Jorge Soler, only being 5 points below average by OPS plus standards. But Kim Eng had a fantastic year. In the offseason, she traded Pablo Lopez for Luis Arraez, who was their most valuable player. I mean, he hit 354, had a 393 on base percentage, had a 469 slugging, an 861 OPS, and a 133 OPS plus. On a team that desperately needed offense, Kim Eng went out and got a 133 OPS plus bat. That is huge. And, the Marlins probably don't make the playoffs without the production they got from Luis Arraez in his 147 games this year. It sucks that he's not going to be available for the playoffs, but, that was big. The second best OPS plus they had on the team was Jorge Soler. 580 plate appearances. He had a 153 OPS and a 128 OPS plus. So both of those are huge. Those are big. And then you get into what she did at the trade deadline. Jake Berger, who she traded for Jake Eder, a prospect of theirs. Jake Berger hit 303, 355, 505 for an 860 OPS. Josh Bell hit 270, 338, 480 for his slash line. So, when you look at the big moves that the Marlins made, and by the way, that doesn't even go into Jesus Luzardo as the number one pitcher for this team by B-WAR. Tanner Scott is the number one reliever. Kim Eng had a great year start to finish, and the Marlins aren't in the playoffs without the moves that she made. That's just what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Got to applaud her for her offseason and midseason moves this past offseason. And
something that I said during the like a couple of weeks ago is that right now I don't think there's a team that's had a better trade deadline than the Marlins. And this could change in the postseason. It can change years from now. Maybe Drew Gilbert and Luis Angel Acuna both end up being Hall of Famers for the Mets, and that's a great trade deadline. But right now, as it stands before the playoffs, you can't name a better team that had a better trade deadline in 2-month immediate impact than the Miami Marlins.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, my first narrative that I got wrong, I did not think the Orioles were in their window quite yet, in their competitive window quite yet. I did not think that they were going to be able to hang with the other, big teams of the American League East. And not only did they hang with them, they were better than all of them. Went 101-61 and won the American League East. I thought they didn't do enough in the offseason to really compete. I thought that, there were a lot of fluky things from 2022 that weren't going to carry over to 2023, but no, they carried over and then some. They took that momentum that they built from June of 2022 and they built on it more, and they went out and won 101 games. It was surprising to me. I did not think they'd be able to do it with the pieces they had and as low payroll as they had, but they've arrived and then some, and they're going to be here for a while, most likely. So yeah, I was very wrong on the Orioles. So yeah, what do you got for second narrative?
My second narrative is, in fact, that the Orioles didn't do enough to address their team needs in the offseason. Yeah, you and I were both wrong at it. I had the Orioles finishing in last in the American League East this year. And look how that turned out. They were there from the start. Like, they started out hot and they just never cooled down at any point. 101 wins is remarkable for that team, obviously. If you had told me that they would have a better record than the Dodgers, I don't think anyone would have taken anyone seriously that said that, but that's what happened. The pieces that they have, they all just found a way to work. Adley Rutschman, even if he took a bit of a step back from last year, he was still a 4-win catcher. He actually did have a higher OPS by 3 points last year, but his defensive metrics were a little down. Gunnar Henderson is going to be the rookie of the year. He made an immediate impact on that team. Ryan Mountcastle looked good. Ryan O'Hearn came out of nowhere and looked really good. Anthony Santander had a solid offensive season. And then most importantly, the rotation. Kyle Bradish has emerged as a legitimate ace. He's going to be the game one starter for Baltimore. And the rotation still looks a little iffy here and there, but they were able to get it done. Obviously, the bullpen was tremendous. Felix Bautista sucks that he's not going to be available for the playoffs or next year, but that's okay because they got Yanier Cano, who they got in the Jorge Lopez trade to just casually put up a 2.11 ERA, and a 5 strikeout to walk ratio. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I was wrong on the Orioles, completely wrong.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, I mean a lot of people were
Mm.
I mean no one, I don't think anyone
I'm
had
happy
them.
to I'm happy to be wrong. Happy to be wrong on it.
Yeah. Yeah, good, good for them. They've seen a lot of, since 2014 they've seen a lot of teams succeed in the division. And now they're jumping in on the party. One of my incorrect narratives was about Trey Turner. I was very high on Trey Turner. I thought that was like maybe the best signing of the offseason.
Hmm.
And I was like kind of, crapping on MLB Network for having him. I think they had him like as the 11th best player in baseball. And I was saying he's a top 5 player based on what he did like the previous couple of years. Thought he should have been rated a top 5 player. And this year proved to me that, yeah, he's not a top 5 player. He started the year really, really awfully. Fortunately for myself and my F4 team, he actually turned it up. Um, you know,
Your league winning F4 team.
yes, my league winning F4 team, shout out. It's fitting that one of us was gonna get it. But good for ARR there. But yeah, as far as Trey Turner went, yeah, like he had a good August, good like yeah, mid-August to September-ish area, but the top 5 players in the league don't slump for the first 4 months of the year. So yeah, there's a great class of players ahead of him. There's a lot of players that stepped up in my personal like best player rankings, notably like Ronald Acuna Jr. Mookie Betts proved that he's here to stay as a really, really good player and not fade off into his 30s. Like a lot of players stepped up. Trey Turner was not one of them. I thought he deserved more recognition before the year, but he's a productive player. He was a productive player this year. He will probably be better next year, but not top 5. So that's my second incorrect narrative.
Yeah. So my last incorrect narrative was that the Cincinnati Reds were only going to have a decent pitching staff, and that was the only thing that there was to be excited with about them. And that was wrong. I had the Reds finishing last in the AL or the NL Central. Instead, they battled for second. They had the same record as the New York Yankees. They had the same record as the San Diego Padres. They had a better record than the New York Mets, a better record than the St. Louis Cardinals. Um, the team just they battled, and a lot of it was because of their offense. In fact, their pitching, unfortunately, ended up being one of their weaker points. As an offense this year, they had the emergence of Spencer Steer. They had the emergence very late of Christian Encarnacion Strand. PJ Friedel was solid this year. Matt McClain was excellent this year. Will Benson was a solid bat for them. Ellie De La Cruz is very fun, you know, although not the best offensively so far this year. But all this goes back to what there was to be excited about with the Reds. One of our friends mentioned before the season, what do you think about the Reds rotation headed by Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Graham Ashcraft? And I said, I think that's the only thing to be excited about with the Reds this year. This offense, although they didn't get the job done late in the season, there was a lot of reason to be excited about what they have going forward. A lot of this team was carried by young guys. I just mentioned all those names. Christian Encarnacion Strand is another one. Elvi Marte is another one. And this is a team that is going to be on people's radars at the start of next year. Unfortunately, the pitching was kind of their weakness with a lot of injury. Lodolo only made a handful of starts. For Ashcraft, I believe, is getting Tommy John surgery. Hunter Green was up and down on the IL. But yeah, the offense was the name of the game for the Reds this year, which I did not expect.
Right, right. Yeah, I was definitely not high on that offense either. But my worst take of all, heading into this year, or at least what was proven to be my worst take, was about the Chicago White Sox. I thought that the 2022 White Sox they were an outlier. Like they lost 80. Everything had to go wrong for them to win 81 games. And they couldn't possibly get worse than that. But
that is what we said too.
yeah, yeah,
It took an anomaly for them to go 500.
yeah. But no, it got way worse. They lost 20 more games. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
At least 20 more
Yikes.
games. And yeah, so I thought the 2022 White Sox were the outlier. Turns out it was the 2021 White Sox that were the outlier. When they won 93 games, that was them at their best. I thought that was them, performing like they should have performed, and I thought they were going to get back to something similar to that this year and win, potentially 90 games, and I had them winning the AL Central. And they could not be further from that. They went either 62 and 100 or 61 and 101. Either way, yeah, they won 61 and 101. They lost 20 more games than last year. I had them, I had this year as a bounce back year. I had Pedro Grifol as manager of the year. And he might be fired. I don't know. Like, unless they want to give him a one more year to try and fix it if it's possible.
Right, again.
But
can't possibly get worse, right?
Yeah. But yeah,
Please.
I could not have been more wrong on the Chicago White Sox this year. Even when they started 7-21, I think sometimes I go back in our group chat to see old messages, and I think Nico was talking about like, oh, White Sox, potentially selling at the deadline, and this was around May, and I was like, well, they're not going to be selling at the deadline. They're going to be competing for the division. And yeah, I kept being wrong about the White Sox. So, unfortunately, with the team on the south side of Chicago, I was very wrong about them. Up until the deadline, pretty much, I was pretty wrong.
Do you think Dylan Cease is like trade value can get lower, or do you think this is where you strike?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Because I mean, he's got 3 years of control, which is a decent amount, but he put up a 4.56 ERA this year, a 3.72 FIP, which is, obviously proves he was unlucky, but he's always been a guy with a high walk rate. He had 4 walks per 9 this year, which is a lot, but it's only 0.2 ahead of what it was last year when he was the Cy Young runner-up.
Yeah, and high walk rate also leads to less innings per start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested. I mean, if it was the right deal.
He made 1 more start this year than he did last year, and he had 7 less innings pitched.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, if the White Sox stop asking for Brian Bayo quality talent, then maybe they could get something out of that. But yeah, I don't know. Because yeah, what else are they going to do with him? So yeah, those are our correct and incorrect narratives of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, now we will preview all these series ahead. I mean, we got 4 wild card series. We got at least 2 of these days. We'll have 4 playoff games on them. I mean, it's a real blessing. Like, we're getting spoiled over here. We used to look forward to 1 day a year. We were guaranteed 4 playoff games in a day. Now we got like 3 or 4, something like that.
At
it's
least,
crazy.
Yeah. At most, like 5, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Very cool.
Depending on how the LDSs line up, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we have. I'm going in order here based on when these games are scheduled. So I'm starting with Rays Rangers, which starts Tuesday at 3 p.m. So all the high school kids and elementary schoolers and middle schoolers, they can get out of school and watch this game. Because it starts
on the East Coast.
On the East Coast, yeah. If you're on the West,
if you're on the West Coast, tough luck.
Yeah, sorry about it. You're gonna have to stream it on your computer while your teacher's giving a lecture.
On your Microsoft 2007 computer.
Yeah, I mean,
neither load Google Doc.
Neither of us ever did that. That's why we have degrees.
Yeah, no, totally. I definitely never streamed playoff games during school.
No, never.
No, that didn't happen in high school. Don't look at Brewers Cubs game 163.
Yeah.
That one I very much watched in class.
Yeah, don't look at my search history on my assigned Google Chrome and look for an ESPN or an MLB TV link.
Yeah,
Or
don't
maybe not for
think
playoffs.
about Astros in Cleveland from 2018.
Yep.
I think that was it though.
But yeah, anyway, regarding the Rays and Rangers, they've matched up 6 times this year. The Rangers won the season series 4-2 and outscored the Rays 27-25 in those 2 series. Those series happened in mid-June and mid-July, so a decent amount of time away. None of these teams have actually really matched up very recently in
No.
for these series, so maybe looking at the season series isn't the best narrative, but just for context. As far as the Rays go at home, which is where they will be, they were 53-28 at home, while the Rangers were 40-41 on the road. And then just looking at team trends, the Rays were 25-12 in their last 37 games for the second best record in Major League Baseball. And the Rangers are 50-52 in their last 102 games. But they are also 8-4 in their last 12. So depending on how you look at it, they could be a little, on the mediocre side, or they could be, trending in the right direction. Although they also did just lose a series. But what are you thinking about, this Rays Rangers series here?
So this is, I believe, a 2010/11 rematch. Is that correct? Right?
Yeah, I think for both, right?
For both, yeah. I like, obviously, a lot of the numbers point to the Rays. The recent trends point to the Rays. I think the biggest weakness with the Rays heading into these playoffs, and we've said this in similar years, is the rotation, right? It's Tyler Glass now at the 1, Zach Eflin at the 2, Aaron Savali at the 3, which I think that's a perfect 1 starter, 2 starter, 3 starter, right? The best teams in the postseason have like 2 aces and a 2 starter as their 1, 2, 3. I think the Rays have a true ace 2 starter, 3 starter. And the most debatable out of all those might be Glass now as an ace. Some people might even say he's a 2. So that's the thing that worries me the most, especially about the Rangers offense, because that is no doubt the biggest strength on their team. However, I don't love the Rangers rotation either. I don't know if they have a true ace. I think they'll probably start Eovaldi game 1. They haven't announced it. If not, they'll start Montgomery in game 1. If he hasn't gone recently against the Mariners, I think he went in the first game of that series. But it'll be some form of Eovaldi, Montgomery 1 and 2, and then probably Dane Dunning in game 3. They'll have Andrew Heaney coming out the bullpen. A bullpen that is in desperate need of help, by the way. I mean, they struggled down the stretch. I think it's two, very similar offenses, very similar pitching staffs, with the Rays having a clear advantage in the bullpen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, and like with the Rays offense, I mean, they got a lot of recognition for what they did in the first, 40 games of the year. But I mean, just throughout the season, they've been extremely good. Last time I checked, the Rays team OPS plus was 114. So they're like right up there with the Rangers, which has become known for their offense, with all their weapons. And yeah, I think the Rays definitely have a clear pitching advantage. The Rangers pitching started the year pretty good, but unfortunately they've fallen off in the past month and a half to 2 months. I put it down that the Rangers as a team, both starters and bullpen, they have a 5.21 ERA /4.96 FIP in their last 41 games of the season. That is the 5th worst ERA and FIP in baseball in this span. They've seen regression from Nathan Eovaldi and their entire bullpen. They've seen injury with Max Scherzer, unfortunately. And yeah, like it's not, and obviously DeGrom has been out since April. So yeah, I mean there's a reason why I said I didn't like at the beginning of the show, why I didn't like the Rangers falling out of the AL West winning spot and into the 5 seed, because it really seems like they're being thrown into the fire here, especially coming off a road trip, and now they're extending the road trip to make it what'll be potentially an 8-9 game road trip. Yeah, I'm pretty down on the Rangers right now, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah. I feel like if we're gonna do our series predictions, we probably have the same thing.
Yeah, I got Rays in 2.
I also have Rays in 2. I would love for the Rangers to prove me wrong, but I think the Rays have been waiting to make a postseason run since 2020. They were out very disappointingly in 2021. They were injured to death in 2022, and they're still very injured this year, especially in the rotation. But they're still a 99 win team. They have an offense headed by Yandy Diaz, who is a legitimate, I think MVP caliber hitter. As a player, full on, probably not, but you know, I still think people don't realize. I think Yandy Diaz is like my Jose Ramirez for you, because I don't think people realize just truly how good of a hitter he is. You had him with Randy Arozarena, in that lineup. Randy's been, kind of that guy for a while. I mean, he's famous for his postseason accomplishments. He went off in the World Baseball Classic this year. You add in, Isaac Paredes hitting 30 home runs with the highest pulled fly ball rate in baseball. Josh Lowe broke out on offense this year. And they have guys that can just find a way at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
And
pretty
then,
deep.
yeah, and most importantly, it's the bullpen, right? I mean, that when the Rays are on, they're on because of their bullpen with Pete Fairbanks, with Colin Poche, Robert Stevenson. Kittredge is back. I don't know how much they're going to actually have him pitch. Kevin Kelly, Chris Davinsky, Sean Armstrong. Like, they have a lot of guys.
Yeah,
Um,
also small sample size alert, but Josh Lowe has 6 extra base hits in his last 6 games.
yeah.
So yeah, he's turned it up as of late. Yandy Diaz the whole season has been great. Yeah, and yeah, he's on both of our all underrated teams.
Also, yeah, you also have Junior Caminero, who's waiting to have a moment. I mean, he had his first home run the other day in Toronto, and he's a guy that's waiting to burst onto the scene. He's a fringe top 10 prospect in all of baseball, called up this year after being in a random trade with the Guardians a couple years ago. He's waiting to have a moment for himself.
Right. And as far as, the starting pitching matchups, and I think, starting pitching matchups sometimes get a bit overrated, but considering the fact that they're around the same level of offense and also the Rays have a better bullpen, like it's probably going to be Glasnow versus Montgomery, because Montgomery will be on 4 days rest heading into that one. And that's somewhat even, but Eflin versus Evaldi's really been struggling. And yeah, he has like a 9.30 ERA in his last, I think, 5 or 6 starts. He's been pretty brutal. So if he is thrown out there, he doesn't have momentum behind him. He'll have to, be doing something new. And, if he has to fall out of the game early, I don't really love that bullpen either. So yeah, pretty low on the Rangers,
the Rays,
but yeah.
The Rays had a 48-44 record versus teams with a winning record this year, which isn't fantastic, but it's hard to have a winning record against those teams. You look at plenty of playoff teams that have even worse records, even losing records to some degree. The Astros had a losing record against teams with a winning record this year, but the Rangers were 42-45.
Mm-hmm.
So I am concerned about. I also think playoff experience matters, and one of these teams has it, and the other team is the Texas Rangers. I know that the Rangers have guys with playoff experience. Corey Seager's a World Series MVP. Nathan Eovaldi's pitched in big games before. Jordan Montgomery, I believe, was the Game 1 postseason starter last year. Or no, Quintana was. But Jordan Montgomery started in the postseason last year, right? For the Cardinals.
No, I think Michaelis went Game 2,
Did
unfortunately.
he?
Yeah, it was kind of stupid.
That is kind of stupid. No wonder they lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the Rangers have guys that have played in the playoffs. I'm sure. Yeah, Marcus Semien was in a couple for the A's, but that was 2020. Which I think we can say now that it's 3 years in advance. Now it's 3 years in the past. We don't count 2020 as playoff experience, especially guys that only played in like a couple rounds.
Yeah, I'm definitely like, I'm way more willing to count like Corey Seager's 2020 playoff experience more than like, I don't know,
Like
like
Lucas
Jesus
Giolito's.
Aguilar
Yeah.
or like or some guy like
Tyrone Taylor.
Right. Yeah. Like some guy who played 2 games in the
Jacob
2020
Nottingham.
postseason. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, anything more on the series?
Yeah, I mean, I got Rays in 2. I don't know. I just think, I mean, they're a 99 win team. Like, they have the second best record in the American League. They have a better record than the Astros, better record than the Rangers, better record than the Twins. 2 games less than the Orioles. Like, very, a bouncer to the other way, and the Rays could have been the 1 seed, and they could have been not playing this weekend. And we could be talking about Orioles Rangers, but ultimately we're talking about Rays Rangers, and I think the Rays are going to win the series in 2.
Yeah, me as well. And also, yeah, the Rays are 25-12 in their last 37 for the second best record baseball in that span. And yeah, like they were, it seemed like they were struggling, and they almost caught up to the Orioles toward the end there. Unfortunately, just came a couple games short. So yeah, now we get into the next American League series that'll start at 4 o'clock on Tuesday in Minnesota. Minnesota. The the Twins and Blue Jays split their season series 3-3. The Twins outscored the Blue Jays 28-26, and those series happened in late May and mid-June. And the Twins at Target Field, which is where this series will be played, was 47-34 at Target Field, and the Blue Jays on the road in general were 46-35. And then as far as trends go, the Blue Jays have been kind of like, they've been sort of up and down. They don't really have a specific trend going for them, but the Twins are 18-10 since the start of September for the second best record in MLB, and their offense has actually been doing pretty well since the start of September as well, with a 126 weighted runs created plus. Although I'm not sure what their schedule exactly looked like, but they've been doing a lot of winning lately. What are you thinking when you're out looking this Blue Jays Twins series?
Right. So these are 2 very interesting teams because, I mean, when you think of the Twins in the playoffs from a National Baseball perspective, it's hard not to think about the fact that they've lost 18 consecutive playoff games dating back to 2004, I believe it was. And, you want to say product of a weak division. You want to say, an AL Central team had to make it, and this happened to be the one. But the Twins have looked really good lately, especially in their offense. Even with the names that they're missing, with Byron Buxton out, with Royce Lewis out, with Joey Gallo out. You mentioned a 126 weighted runs created plus since the start of September, one of the best in baseball. They've found ways to get it done, and their pitching staff, I'd argue, you could put up with any in the playoffs, with Pablo Lopez in the 1, with Joe Ryan's in the 3. Who am I missing in the 2 there?
Sonny Gray.
Yep. Sonny Gray, who's been a fipster this year.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, their bullpen, I think, is pretty interesting. They have some subtle names. Duran is not one of them. That's a guy that everyone knows. But, I mean, the Twins bullpen has some names that you might not know very well, but they are very strong, very good pitchers. Caleb Felbar is one that comes to mind. I believe he was your player to watch this year. Louis Varland, Griffin Jack, Emilio Pagan. And then Chris Paddock coming out of the bullpen, the guy that we talked about with Mark Simon. Kenta Maeda will be coming out of the bullpen. Jorge Alcala is an interesting name. I think the Twins bullpen is maybe the sneaky best part of their team.
Yeah, they're an interesting crew. Like, I was very ready to be down on them, considering they were, AL Central favorites, since like the All-Star break-ish. Like they were pretty comfortably ahead for a while. By the
way, Carlos Correa also out. Completely forgot to mention him.
Yeah, he might be in there. But yeah, like they were only 4 games above 500 as late as like late August, and then they've turned it up since then and are now 12 games above 500. And seem pretty legitimate. Like their starting staff is one of the best in these playoffs, which is something to say. I mean, starting pitching does have some value here in the playoffs. As far as the Blue Jays go, like I have no idea. Like I have no idea what their identity is. Like they could, whatever they do this postseason will not surprise me. They could get swept in 2 games. Yep. They could go to the World Series, and I won't be shocked because they have a high level of talent, but have not really had the execution that I've expected them to have the past couple of years, whether it be in the regular season or the postseason last year. I had them sweeping the Mariners last year, and I was dead wrong about that. They, got shut out in the first game and then blew a 7-run lead in the second game. So yeah, I don't really know what to expect with this Blue Jays team. Like they could hand the Twins their first, playoff victory in 16 years or 20 years
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
But going into the Blue Jays now, last year we saw the Philadelphia Phillies make a run to the World Series as the sixth seed, and at one point it really looked like they were going to win the entire thing. I think the Blue Jays are the team most likely to replicate that, as it pertains to talent on the roster. It has nothing to do with the fact that they are the sixth seed, but they have a team that if all cylinders are clicking, that's a team that you don't want to face with the offense headed by, Vlad Guerrero Jr. if he finds his way, which he looks like he has recently. Bo Bichette, George Springer, who has a ton of playoff experience with the Astros. Um, yeah, that's a fun team to get behind. And then they're in the rotation. It's Gosman, Bassett, Barrios, who will be making his return to Minnesota, or one of his returns to Minnesota. Bullpen has some names at the back end as well, with Romano as a closer, with Jordan Hicks, Eric Swanson, Tim Meza. They're a team that looks like if everything goes right, they could be the hottest team in the league.
Yeah, for sure. And to make an even, to make a parallel to the last year's Phillies as well, was like the Phillies were not hot heading into their playoff run. I think they had lost like 13 of their previous 20, and there wasn't like, just momentum wise, there wasn't a lot of reason to believe in the Phillies, but they flipped a switch, found some key performers, and were able to, drive through the National League playoffs and almost win the World Series. So yeah, the playoffs, or the Blue Jays are, I think, perfectly capable of that. They have about as much talent, or even more talent, than the Phillies did last year. So yeah, like I'm not surprised at anything they do. They have the talent to do it. It's just about execution, which they've not met full expectations on doing that over the past couple of years. Anything more before we do predictions?
No, I think that's kind of it.
Well, I would feel silly to think the Twins are going to snap this streak. If they do snap this streak, I'm fine being wrong about it, but I don't want to, and it's not even about the streak. I think the Blue Jays are just objectively a better team, and I think they can. I think even if their starting pitching is somewhat evenly matched, I think the Blue Jays pitchers have, they can outduel Minnesota's starting pitching. I think the Blue Jays offense is better, and their bullpen by ERA has been better this year. Blue Jays have a 3.68 bullpen ERA. Twins are at 3.95. So the Blue Jays were 8th in bullpen ERA this year. Twins were 15th. So when it gets to those later innings, I also trust the Blue Jays a little bit more. So yeah, I have the Blue Jays in 2. What do you have for this series?
I was a little more generous. I put Blue Jays in 3. I think it's a pretty even match. I think the Twins will find their way into 1. But yeah, I do have them snapping the streak.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't have them winning the series.
That can be their World Series, is snapping the streak.
They win game 2 to like salvage a game 3. They're just like running on the field. They're celebrating like they won the World Series. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like those guys that celebrate going off the mound after strike 2. It'll be like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have the Blue Jays winning this series though. And I think this might be, in my opinion, the most competitive series.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. They're pretty evenly matched across the board.
Yeah.
It's just, 20-year-long narratives have gotten to my head.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, like the last time the Twins were in the playoffs, we wrote off the other team. Like, are you kidding me? Obviously the Twins are winning this series, and they got swept at home by a team. Granted, it was the Astros with their lineup, but a team with a losing record.
Yeah.
Like, come on now.
Yeah.
You think the Twins are gonna lose to that thing?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be that wrong again. So yeah, I'm going Blue Jays in 2 here. So that's the American League slate that we have in these next 3 days: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or just 2 days, who knows. According to my predictions, the AL playoffs will only be the AL wildcard series will only be 2 days. So now we get into the National League slate, which starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in American Family Field, where the 3-seeded NL Central champion Brewers are going to be facing off against the 6-seeded Arizona Diamondbacks. As far as the outlook of this series, the Diamondbacks won the season series 4-2 and outscored the Brewers 30-19 in those 2 series. Although they were a pretty long time ago, those series happened in mid-April and mid-June, which is kind of when the Diamondbacks were really going off earlier in the season. At American Family Field, the Brewers were 49-32, and the Diamondbacks on the road were 41-40. As far as trends go, the Brewers have been doing really, really well as of late. In their last 40 games, they have a 27-13 record for the best record in Major League Baseball. From a pitching standpoint, they have a 2.87 ERA and 3.84 FIP in their last 40 games, which is the best ERA in Major League Baseball and the third best FIP. And also from an offensive standpoint, they have a 107 weighted runs created plus in their last 40 games, which is 10th best in MLB. So they're doing it from both sides as of late. How do you outlook this series?
I don't know what to think here. Remember last year when we watched the Guardians and Rays series, and we're thinking, seriously, one of these teams has to play the Yankees after this? Like, why does one of these teams have to move on? That's kind of how I feel about both of these teams. The Brewers, yes, they're hot. The Diamondbacks, yes, they're fun. I don't think a lot of people saw them making the playoffs this year, and they did. The Brewers, have been, I don't want to say boring, but there's nothing that really excites me about that team outside of the pitching staff and bullpen. Definitely nothing on the offense outside of I guess William Contreras. That really really gets me excited to watch the team. But I think it's 2 very similar teams. The Brewers have very strong pitching, a great bullpen headed by Devin Williams, headed by Abner Uribe, who I talked about recently, Joel Payamp, bunch of guys, which is fun, very cool, very fun. Obviously, they have Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta in their rotation, which is going to be probably the best 1-2-3 that any team in the postseason has. I think that's an actually fair thing to say. The Diamondbacks are starting Brandon Pfaadt in Game 1 to give Gallen a little more rest, and then should there be a Game 3, it'll be Merrill Kelly. Which I like the Game 2 and 3 matchups, but I don't love the Game 1 matchup for the Diamondbacks.
Right. Yeah. It's very uneven.
Here's my spin though. The Diamondbacks over the weekend had Zach Gallen face the Astros on Friday, and Merrill Kelly faced them on Saturday. And Friday they lost 2-1, and Saturday they lost 1-0. They allowed 3 runs to the Astros lineup in 2 games, and that's the Astros playing for something, right? It's not the post-clinch mailing it in Astros. It's the Astros fighting for a playoff spot, and they held that lineup to 3 runs in 2 days. And Ryan Nelson pitched on Sunday, and the wheels came off a bit, but he's not starting a playoff game. The 2 that started on Friday and Saturday are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's really hard to look at this series, and I want to get one thing one thing that sort of bothers me when I look at playoff analysis and stuff is, and I've referenced it in on Twitter and stuff, but I think a lot of people have the Brewers is they're the sneaky team, you got to watch out for them because of their starting pitching. And yeah, I mean they have amazing starting pitching, but it takes more than starting pitching and bullpen to win the World Series. And that's why I tweeted out the stat that, in the last 6 years, since 2017, the team leader in starting pitching ERA has won the World Series 0 times. The team leader in runs scored offensively has won the World Series 3 times. Half the time it's been the offensive leader in runs scored. Whereas with starting pitching, it's been 0 times. So yeah, there's more to it than the starting pitching matchups, and the Brewers offense is very underwhelming. However, the Diamondbacks offense isn't great. I believe their team OPS plus this year is under 100. Like the Brewers, and the Brewers have been trending better. As I mentioned, they were 7% above average over the last 40 games. So there is that. So it's kind of two teams sort of in a way cut from the same cloth, which kind of confuses me a little bit.
Both teams have very, I think, top heavy lineups where it's like good hitters 1 through 5-ish and 1 through 4-ish, and then the rest of it's kind of underwhelming. With the Brewers, it's Yelich, it's Contreras, it's Carlos Santana, who's been hot lately, it's Mark Canha, who's been hot lately. With the Diamondbacks, it's Corbin Carroll leading off, it's Ketel Marte second, Christian Walker, like the handful of guys that they have, Tommy Pham, maybe Gabriel Moreno. I think I like the Diamondbacks guys better than the Brewers guys on offense.
Yeah, for
by a
sure.
hair.
Yeah. Christian Walker, I mean, has great home run ability. He's had a weird last month or so. He was slumping, and then he had 3 hits, 2 homers, and a double, and then went back to slumping. It was weird. I've been keeping a close eye on him for other reasons, but yeah, as far as the Diamondbacks go, obviously they have Marte, as you mentioned. Carroll is such a weapon, but yeah, there are definitely some holes there. But with Milwaukee, there's those same holes. So it is weird to evaluate, and at a certain point, you do have to just look at the starting pitching matchups and see what's happening. And also, I think one thing we should mention is bullpen versus bullpen. Brewers have a very, very clear advantage. The Diamondbacks, whether it be on paper or whether it be roster or numbers, they do not really keep up with the Brewers from a bullpen standpoint.
Yeah, no, they definitely don't. So I do want to get into this one. This is, by the way, also a rematch of a previous year, 2011, the Nyjer Morgan series.
Yes, who could forget that?
Yeah.
Who could forget that? And just to back up on numbers, the Brewers were second in bullpen ERA this year, and the Diamondbacks were 18th. So yeah, what do you got for predictions?
I have Milwaukee in 2. I think game 1 is gonna go to the Diamondbacks, just because I like the Corbin Burns versus Brandon Pfaadt matchup a little better for Milwaukee, and then from there I think it's kind of just gonna be, Diamondbacks lose game 1 and the Brewers just take game 2. Kind of how I said earlier about how losing one game puts you in such a tough spot after playing so many, and then all of a sudden you lose one and your season's on the line. I think that's kind of the situation that the Diamondbacks are going to be in. I don't anticipate a lot of high scoring in these games. I really don't.
Yeah, no.
I think back to the 2021 NLDS with the Brewers and Braves where they lost. I think they scored 3 runs total in the first 3 games or something like that. It was not good.
Yep.
The only run they scored in their win was a Rowdy Tellez home run.
Right. Yeah, it was rough. Yeah, with the Brewers,
The actual number, though.
do we have an idea of who they're going to throw out there on Wednesday?
I would assume either Woodruff or Peralta.
Yeah.
Yeah, they scored. Sorry, I'm sorry. I overestimated. The Brewers scored 2 runs in 3 games.
Yeah,
I said
right.
3, like a fool. They did score 4 runs in game 4, but of course they lost that one.
Yep. And Gallen pitched on Friday, so we would go Wednesday.
On Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm thinking
I think they might go Peralta game 2 just because he has pitched more this year.
Yeah, and he's been
Woodruff's the bigger name, and he's done very well in the time that he has pitched, but he's missed a large chunk of the season due to injury.
Right.
Peralta is, arguably just as good right now. So I would throw Peralta out there for game 2 and obviously Burns game 1.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Brewers in 2. I was tempted to go 3, but I think we've just seen a lot of sweeps, and I think that's going to continue to trend in with this one. And yeah, I think Brewers take it in 2. That game 1 matchup seems pretty overwhelming for the Diamondbacks, and I just like the way the Brewers are trending. And this isn't me making a declaration that they're a sneaky team and that they're gonna they have a good shot against the Dodgers and Braves. I don't think that, But as far as them matched up against the 84 win Diamondbacks, who haven't necessarily been crazy hot as of late, yeah, I like that matchup for the Brewers. I like the home field advantage as well. They've done very well at home with a 49-32 record, and it's proven to work for them in the past, that home field advantage. Their only win in the 2021 playoffs was at home, and they did well in 2018 and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think people might have to be prepared to be disappointed with this Diamondbacks offense over the next couple days. They might score 0 to 1 to 2 runs, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm taking Brewers in 2. I really wanted to go against them, but I think they're going to win in 2 games here.
Here's the thing that I think is fun. And I meant to get to this point earlier, but I kind of forgot. But with the Diamondbacks having held the Astros and their lineup in win now mode to 3 runs over 2 days, now they get to face the Brewers offense, which is very fun because that was you're going from Astros to Brewers, which is much different. But at the same time, they scored a combined 1 run in those 2 games against I believe it was Christian Javier and Justin Verlander, some combination of those 2, and both of them are solid pitchers. But moving from those 2 to Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff and Freddie Peralta, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Plus the Brewers bullpen.
This series is going to be like watching me play MLB The Show. Like, I'm good at pitching, but I cannot hit for anything. So it's going to be some 2-1, 3-2 ball games.
You have a chase rate of 85%.
Yeah. I have a whiff rate of about 50%.
That'd be generous for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard game on at least on the hitting side.
Yeah.
So yeah, we both have Brewers in 2. Now on to the last series of the docket, which starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be between the Philadelphia Phillies and the Miami Marlins. The Marlins actually won this season series 7-6. However, the Phillies did outscore them 64-55. So it was a pretty close season series between the 2 teams. Phillies are 49-32 at home this year. Marlins are 38-42 on the road this year. So Phillies, have a great advantage at home. Marlins are under 500 on the road. And the Phillies' success could be more measured long term. Over the last 105 games, they are 65-40 for the 4th best record in MLB. Well, the Marlins have been really good over the past month and really snuck into that now 5th seed in the NL playoffs. They've gone 18-10 in their last 28 games, tied for the 2nd best record in Major League Baseball. And yeah, what are you thinking about this upcoming series?
I'm thinking about the Phillies trying to avenge last year. The Marlins, known for their chaos throughout their franchise's history. This is the 4th time now they've been in the postseason. 2 of those times they've won the World Series. One of those times they knocked out a Cubs team that a lot of people had hoped for. And then, kind of put the final nail into the coffin to the Cubs championship window, because the next year was when they sold. And then, lost the Braves. But, it's an interesting 2 NL East rivals. The Marlins are fun, to have in here. Phillies have the postseason experience, obviously, last year. Yeah, I think that's really all I have on that before I say my actual prediction.
Yeah, I'm really tempted to go in the Marlins direction here, just because this is the most unanalytical thing I'll say all episode is they seem very scrappy. They just seem like they're gonna get it done. But
yeah,
but going away from that, there are some pieces that they've added midseason that have made them a better team. They also, they beat the Phillies in the season series, particularly against Aaron Nola, who's the game 2 starter. Aaron Nola had a 6.75 ERA against them this year in 3 starts with a 5.07 FIP. So yeah, he didn't do great against the Marlins. But yeah, the Phillies Phillies being at home for me is a huge factor. Like,
Mhm.
you know, the Marlins were under 500 on the road. Well, the Phillies, like we saw how lit up Citizens Bank Park was last year. And, you know, like the only team that could beat them in that park was the World Series
Themselves.
champion Astros. Like, and it took, and they didn't do it easily. I mean, they had to throw a no-hitter, a combined no-hitter, and win a really, really tight game with a great catch at the end by Chas
By Chas
McCormick.
McCormick, right.
And that was after, I think they still got outscored in Citizens Bank Park, because that was after they
because they got
lost.
crushed in Game 3.
Yeah, they lost 7-0 or something like that in Game 3. So yeah, I mean, the Phillies being at home for me is a huge factor. What do you got for predictions?
One more thing I will say before my prediction is last year we watched Bryce Harper completely take over in the postseason. He hit 349 with an 1160 OPS, 6 home runs, 13 RBIs, 7 doubles. Imagine what he does with a healthy UCL.
Yeah, that is the factor.
I'm going
He's been
Phillies
trending
in
pretty
2.
well too.
I'm going Phillies. Yeah, I cannot. It's Wheeler and Nola at the top of the rotation. I don't love that Luis Ariz is out for the Marlins. It sucks, but I don't know. Like, hey, listen, if the Marlins prove me wrong and become chaotic once again, good for them. I'm gonna be on the safe side here.
Yeah, Daniel's got Philly in 2. Also, Bryce Harper in his last 12 games has a 1210 OPS.
Mhm.
So he's trending in the right direction as well. Yeah, I mean, I was tempted with the Marlins, but you know, just roster wise, they don't really compete in any way. The Phillies have the better offense. I believe there's better starting rotation, also the better bullpen. I was looking at bullpen ERA ranks just to see, like, I thought the Marlins were doing better in the bullpen, but they actually have the I believe 10th worst bullpen ERA this year. It's outside of Tanner Scott. There hasn't really been much out of the bullpen, at least as of late, with the Marlins. And with the Phillies, they actually, you know, not really known for having a bullpen, having a great bullpen. They actually have the 6th best bullpen ERA this year. So they've fixed some things up over there. So yeah, I will go Phillies in 2 as well.
You have sweeps across the board.
I have sweeps across the board. I
Yeah.
hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
But
I put 1 series going to 3.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point with the Marlins offense being debilitated without Luis Ariz. You know, they still have some good pieces in there, but they got to face Wheeler and Nola.
The
And
thing that sorry to cut you off, but the thing that really has me going Phillies in 2 is like the thing that wins games in the postseason is home runs. Like, you look at every year the record of the teams that out homer their opponents, and I just can't see the Marlins out homering the Phillies. That doesn't compute in my head.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And yeah, I like the Phillies offense going against Luzardo and Garrett much more than I do the Marlins offense going against Wheeler and Nola. Although, you know, Nola hasn't had good numbers against the Marlins, but you know, those are 3 starts. He's only got 1 start here. But yeah, I feel like, you know, I can be proven wrong in any of these series.
Yeah.
But you know, Phillies at home is really the difference maker for me. Especially, I think if they played a couple in Miami, it might be a little bit different, but that environment is crazy. So yeah, I mean, anything more before we get into players to highlight?
No, let's do it.
All right, so now for the final time this year, we will get into our players to highlight. These are, every single one is going to be a member of a playoff team, whether they be playing this week or they're a team that's on a bye right now. Because, you know, we want to see where they're trending, whether they're trending in the right or wrong direction heading into the playoffs. Because if we selected a pirate like I did last year, it's like,
Yeah.
oh great, take that in the off season. But you know,
Yeah.
these guys are going to be playing games.
This guy had a great 12 games. Watch out for him in April.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't do that.
So without further ado, here is our Monday, October 2nd, 2023 edition of How About That.
He's striking out less, walking more, and he's also making better contact.
turning into a strikeout machine just out of nowhere.
He's been excellent all around this year.
And he is getting a...
How about that?
So for my how about that, I'm going with a guy that I briefly mentioned, very, very briefly mentioned earlier in the show. I'm talking about Robert Stevenson of the Tampa Bay Rays. Also, I'm going reliever diving for the 4th time this year, ending on a splash. But Robert Stevenson, since he was acquired by the Rays in early June by the Pirates, he has a 2.35 ERA and a 2.45 FIP in 38 and a third innings pitched with Tampa. And over his last 18 appearances, dating back to August 11th, he has an 0.56 ERA and an 0.76 FIP. He has in 28 strikeouts, 1 walk, 1 home run allowed, and 5 hits allowed in 16 innings pitched in that time. His 1.2 fWAR leads all relievers. Now, this is the end of the Robert Stevenson. How about that? And the beginning of the Robert Stevenson cutter. How about that? Because that's really what this is. On June 18th, Stevenson threw a cutter for the first time in his career. He had never thrown it before. He thrown it with the Rays in a game in June, like one of his first appearances with the Rays. And since then, he has thrown a slider 69.9% of the time. That is by far his primary pitch. And there's a good reason for it, because the whiff rate against his cutter is 59.9%. A whiff rate of almost 60% on a cutter. Not only did that lead the majors this year by 15%, but it leads all season since 2008 with at least 100 swings against the cutter by 4%. And by the way, that is out of 1,117 seasons. And when hitters do hit the ball on the very rare occasion, they hit 101 and slug 253 against this cutter. That average is the lowest among the 105 pitchers with at least 50 plate appearances ending on cutters. The slugging percentage is 5th lowest. The WOBA, which is 151, is the lowest. Again, the next lowest WOBA is 187. His is 151. And for expected numbers, his 123 expected batting average on his cutter is tied for the lowest. 244 expected slugging is the 5th lowest. And the 160 xWOBA was the lowest. His 3.8 run value per 100 is the 2nd highest. And the 88.3 mile per hour average exit velocity against his cutter is the 9th lowest among the 135 pitchers with at least 25 batted balls. And lastly, he has a 25.6% sweet spot rate against his cutter. This guy went from not throwing a cutter at all to throwing maybe the best cutter we've seen in the pitch tracking era, which is asinine. It's ludicrous. It's insane. And that's Robert Stevenson and his new cutter.
Yeah, Robert Stevenson and his cutter.
How about that?
Yeah.
Again, a 60% whiff rate.
Yeah.
Against any pitch is ridiculous, but a fastball is even more impressive.
Yeah, I was about to say a cutter is usually like thrown to induce weak contact, not necessarily get a swing and miss. Like you use the breaking stuff like a slider to get the swing and miss.
What was funny? There's 82 plate appearances ending on his cutter. And I naively thought that 50 batted balls would be a good, benchmark for the total pitch parameters. But then I forgot he only has 41 because everyone strikes out against it, and thus they do not have batted balls against it.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. So yeah, shout out to Robert Stevenson. Probably going to be pitching against the Rangers in the coming days. My how about that is a different American League East pitcher. And he will not be pitching this week. He will probably be pitching next week, and struggled to start the year, but seemed natural. He is a rookie, and I'm talking about Grayson Rodriguez, who has really turned it up and become a potential, real reliable starter option for the Orioles. Like one of the things I was probably right about in the first few months of the year was that the Orioles starting rotation did not really inspire much. But with Bradish and Rodriguez emerging over the past few months, it seems like they really have something there in that starting rotation, at least with those two. So with Grayson Rodriguez, in his last 12 starts, which dates back to his second start since being brought back up after he was sent down midseason, in those last 12 starts, he has a 2.26 ERA and 2.76 FIP in 71 2/3 innings pitched. And out of 58 qualifying pitchers in this span, his ERA ranks 2nd and FIP ranks 5th. And out of 71 pitchers with 1,000+ pitches thrown in the span. Grayson Rodriguez's expected slugging against ranks 5th, and his expected WOBA against ranks 4th out of 71. And much of this actually has to do with batted ball data and not strikeouts, because actually his strikeout rate has gone down in this span, not by much, but very slightly. However, his contact against him, his overall quality of contact against him has gone down, a lot more. His average exit velocity against has gone from 91.9 miles per hour before the span to 88.2 miles per hour, 3.7 mile per hour difference in average exit velocity. And his average exit velocity against on fly balls has gone from 97.1 miles per hour to 89.6 miles per hour. That's a 7.5 mile per hour difference right there. And his barrel rate, because of this, drop in exit velocity on fly balls, has gone from 13% before the span to 3% in this span. And out of 105 pitchers with 150+ batted balls against in this span, Grayson Rodriguez's barrel rate is the lowest in baseball. And therefore, his home run rate has gone from 5.6% to 1.1%. And out of 58 qualifying pitchers in the span, his home runs per 9 is the lowest in baseball. Part of this has to do with him getting more ground balls, and a lot less good quality contact that's, threatening to go over the fence. His ground ball rate has gone from 40% before the span to 52% in this span. And out of 105 pitchers with 150+ batted balls against in this span, his ground ball rate is 13th highest. Also, his line drive rate has gone from 32% to 20%. And out of 105 pitchers, his line drive rate is 14th lowest. And his sweet spot rate has gone from 43% to 26%. And out of 105 pitchers, his sweet spot rate is the 4th lowest in baseball, after having a very, very above average rate before the span. Also, we've seen a bit of a change in pitch mix from him. Before the span, he had an 889 slugging against his cutter, which he threw 11% of the time, and he's basically dropped that pitch from his mix. He now only throws it 1% of the time. So Grayson Rodriguez has made some adjustments that has made him have much better quality of contact against him, and made him a much more effective pitcher and a potential playoff starter in the Orioles rotation. So Grayson Rodriguez.
How about that?
All right, and now we will go from the highs to the lows, where we're talking players and subjects that have been underperforming with our Monday, October 2nd, 2023 edition of Slightly Alarming Statistics.
Yeah, so for my slightly alarming, I'm going with another Oriole guy on the offensive side of the ball that's been struggling lately. It's Cedric Mullins, who since September 12th is slashing 131, 169, 213 for a 382 OPS and a 1 single weighted runs created plus. You can't even really call it a weighted runs created plus because it's 1. He has a 1 weighted run created plus in this span, and minus 0.5 F4. Among the 168 qualifiers in this span, Cedric Mullins ranks 2nd lowest in batting average, last in OBP, 4th lowest in slugging, and then last in OPS, last in weighted run created plus, and last in F4. He's been one of the worst hitters, maybe the worst position player in the league in this span. Before this span, he had a strikeout rate of 20.5%, and in this span, it is up to 32.3%. It has gone up 12%. Before this span, his walk rate was 10.2%, and in this span, he has slashed it to 4.6%. It is more than just half of what it was. His chase rate has gone from 25.6% before the span to 36% in this span, so he's chasing 11% more. That's never a good sign. And so that's his swing decisions, and his batted balls have been bad as well. Before the span, his ground ball rate was just 36.1%, but in this span, it is up to 41.4%. It is up over 5%. And his fly ball rate has gone from 32.3% before the span, 24.5% now in this span. So that's down 8% on fly balls. And also, 19.5% of his batted balls during this span have been negative 55 degrees or lower, or 55 degrees or higher, which means it's very, very straight into the ground or very up in the air. 19.5% of the time. That is the 12th highest rate among the 271 hitters with at least 25 batted balls in this span. Been an honor doing year 4 of Players to Highlight, but we are ending it, unfortunately, with Cedric Mullins.
Yeah, Cedric Mullins.
Slightly alarming.
Yeah, pretty tough there heading into the playoffs. Yeah, he hasn't been quite the same since the injury. He suffered a groin injury back in May, came back for a brief stint, went back on the IL, and yeah, just hasn't been quite the same since then. My slightly alarming is a guy we referenced earlier in the show, and I didn't get too much into detail, so I could highlight him here. But I'm talking about Nathan Eovaldi of the Texas Rangers. He also had an IL stint, and since coming off the IL, he has not been performing. Since he came off the IL on September 5th, he has a 9.30 ERA and 7.88 FIP in 20 and a third innings pitched. And out of 107 pitchers with 20 plus innings pitched since Eovaldi came off the IL, he has the worst ERA and FIP in baseball. Out of 126 pitchers with 300 plus pitches thrown in the span, Eovaldi's expected slugging against is 9th highest and expected WOBA against is 7th highest. Also, his walk rate has gone from 7% before the span to 13% in this span. And out of 107 pitchers with 20 plus innings pitched in this span, his walk rate is the 7th highest in baseball. He has also gone from throwing 47% of his pitches inside the strike zone to 42% of his pitches inside the strike zone. And out of 126 pitchers with 300 plus pitches thrown in the span, his in-zone percentage is 3rd lowest. And out of 61 pitchers with 400 plus pitches thrown, his in-zone percentage is the lowest. So he's throwing a lot less pitches in the strike zone, therefore giving out a lot more free passes. 7th worst walk rate in the league since he came off the IL. Also, his strike rate on no strike counts has gone from 65% to 58%. So he's had a much harder time getting ahead in counts or even just getting even in counts. And his average, and that's all the control stuff. Now we get into the quality of contact, which has also been really, really bad for Nathan Eovaldi. His average exit velocity against has gone from 87.8 miles per hour before the span to 93.1 miles per hour in this span, nearly a hard hit ball. And his barrel rate has gone from 7% to 13%. And out of 128 pitchers with 50 plus batted balls against in the span, his barrel rate is the 12th highest in baseball. And specifically on those barrels, many of them are pulled, and his pulled barrel rate has gone from 1.5% before the span to 9.7% in the span. And out of 128 pitchers, his pulled barrel rate is the 5th highest. And on those pulled barrels, just generally speaking, pulled barrels get better results than, something that's hit straight away because they go to shorter ends of the ballpark. And, hitters tend to like to pull the ball because they get better results on it. And hitters are 6 for 6 with 5 home runs and a double on the pulled barrels against Nathan Eovaldi. And, therefore his home run rate has skyrocketed. It's gone from 1.7% before the span to 7.1% in the span. And out of 107 pitchers with 20 plus innings pitched in the span, Nathan Eovaldi's home runs per 9 is the 2nd highest in baseball. So nothing really going right for Nathan Eovaldi, a potential playoff starter for the Rangers. But yeah, a 9.30 ERA in his last 6 starts, 20 innings pitched, giving up a lot of home runs, a lot of pulled barrels, and not throwing the ball in the strike zone when he's not giving up that hard contact. So yeah, nothing really going right. And part of the reason why I have the Rays in 2, because if he starts the game, I'm not really putting too much full trust in him. So Nathan Eovaldi.
Slightly alarming.
That's it for season 4 of Players to Highlight.
That's it for season 4. Yeah, we did collectively between the two of us 41 of them, because
wow.
42 regular season episodes, and we don't do them at the All-Star break.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Although I didn't do them the one show when we did the all underrated team.
Yeah, well, we've both done at least 40. So
yeah.
good for us there.
Heck of a job.
Crossed every team off the list as our goal was to,
Mhm.
got our last team almost a month ago now.
Yep.
So yeah, that does it for players to highlight. And yeah, lastly, we'll get into just a bit of news, some, sentimental, some very unfortunate news. But we will start with Miguel Cabrera.
Start with Miguel Cabrera, who obviously retired yesterday for the Detroit Tigers and from Major League Baseball after a 21-year career in Major League Baseball. He finishes his career with 511 home runs, tying Mel Ott. He finishes with, I believe, 3,174 career hits.
Yep.
Yeah, an iconic career. Uh, we've seen a lot of, legendary players retire in the last few years. David Ortiz in 2016, Jeter in 14, Mariano Rivera in 13, Pujols last year, Miggy this year, and a couple of others. For me, this is really the one that's making me feel old the most because Miguel Cabrera, I think, is the first of these types of players to retire where, I grew up during their peak. I watched them at their best. I saw them in their, decline, old man years, so to say, and I saw them at the end of their career. With Pujols, I didn't really see him um, at his peak. I didn't watch him in 2005, 2008. Ortiz didn't really have his old man years. Like he was kind of just always in his prime, and then he went out in his prime. And Jeter and Mo, I was too young to watch those moments as well. But Miguel Cabrera to me is, when I think of the era when I grew up watching baseball, Miguel Cabrera was the best hitter in the league. And if you said anyone else was better than him, you were wrong. There's no debating that. Um, so it's sad to see him go. I was lucky enough to be at one of his last games, technically the game where he hit his last home run. Um, but it definitely, I definitely felt a lot of emotions watching him in his last game yesterday. He was always such a mainstay, regardless of, regardless of how the Tigers were as a team. They obviously were really tough to watch from 15 through 23 but but you could always count on Miguel Cabrera being there. um you could always count on him being like around an average bat for those last few years, but he was an icon from like his peak, which was, I guess you could say probably like 20 through 16, but really from like 2010 through 13, like that was the 4-year span where he was the best hitter in baseball for a 4-year span, a 337 batting average, 1037 OPS, 178 OPS plus, a triple crown, 2 MVPs. There was just nobody better.
Yeah, no, yeah, he was overwhelmingly the best hitter in baseball for a little bit. Just looking at, to break it down statistically, not just including hitting, but just Fangraphs wins above replacement from 2007 to 2016, a 10-year span there. He was the leader in Fangraphs wins above replacement. So for a 10-year span, best player in baseball. He was just consistently there. He had, looks like, I think 10 11 consecutive 100 RBI seasons. No matter the situations you're dealt, you can't be a bad hitter when you're driving in 100 runs 11 straight years. And yeah, from 07 to 2016 also, he had 456 batting runs. The next best had 369. He was almost 100 batting runs better than the next best guy in that 10-year span. So I mean, he was overwhelmingly like the best guy, like a guy that no one wanted to face. He was not easy to strike out. He was not easy to get out. He didn't have really any bad tendencies in his prime. It seemed like, I'm sure there's some scouting reports from 2012 that may have them, but pitchers seem to have hard times finding them. Obviously, Triple Crown winner, but that's just the first of many things you can bring up with him. An amazing hitter, like flawless for a few years there. And yeah, I mean, when he arrived with Detroit, like his first year there, they were a 74 win team. So like they were, he was there for some bad before they even got, to the playoffs for 4 consecutive years. And then obviously his, as his career tapered off, so did the Tigers. But yeah, I mean, a major reason as to why they made those playoffs 4 years in a row. Obviously, an MVP for 2 of those years, and yeah, he'll have an amazing legacy within Detroit because he was a major part of why they succeeded in the early 2010s.
It was the reason they succeeded. I mean, he was the guy. Um, even like growing up as a team that faced Miguel Cabrera in a playoff series, like there was, as nervous as I was anytime he stepped on deck, there was some excitement knowing like this is the guy, this is the best hitter, this is the guy that you're gonna be telling, it was one of the first like I'm gonna tell my kids about this guy, type of players that I saw growing up. No doubt, I saw him the first Major League Baseball game I ever went to actually, was Tigers and Yankees at Yankee Stadium. I knew next to nothing about like not next to nothing, but I didn't know a lot about baseball. I definitely didn't know anything about Detroit Tigers. I knew Johnny Damon was on the team, and I knew him because he was a Red Sox and he was a Yankee prior. But Miguel Cabrera, I believe, hit 2 home runs that game. Trying to find the game here in his game log. Yep, there it is. He went 2 for 3 with 2 home runs in that game. The Tigers lost, but I remember thinking, man, like this Cabrera guy's pretty good. Obviously, clearly he's doing something right, and those 2 home runs raised his average to 340 and his OPS to 1077. So Miguel Cabrera was kind of part of my introduction to baseball, which is, very cool that the guy that I was like, oh, wow, this guy's pretty good, ended up being, a future first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I kind of learned about him through like MLB 2K because like
Yep.
I would face him in like franchise mode, and I hadn't heard of the guy. Like I knew back in like the 2K8 days or 2K10 days, like I knew about, I think Gary Sheffield was on the team at one of those times, and like I knew about him, but there's this guy hitting third, and he's got 95 power and also like 90 plus contact. Like he doesn't really have any weak points. Like I don't who is this guy? Why aren't more people talking about him? Like he hits 300 easily, and he also hits like 30 home runs a year. Like this guy's crazy. But yeah, no, like he was that guy. I think he was underrated for a little bit, and then eventually got his got what he deserved and the recognition he deserved. And yeah, just to drop another stat, he's the only member of the club that hit 500 home runs and 3,000 hits. Only member of that club to also hit over 305 throughout his career. So yeah, I mean, like a true special talent. So feel feel happy that we got to witness this in our lifetimes here.
Yeah, I mean, we got to witness, the best part of Miguel Cabrera in our lifetimes. He finishes with a career average above 300, an OPS of 901, which is definitely a nice, solid number there. I feel like we haven't touched enough on his Marlins days because they were good too. I feel like people forget, when he was with the Marlins, he had an 929 OPS career, 313 average in 138 career home runs. Like he was a stud for the Marlins. Uh, he was known for being the centerpiece in one of the most lopsided trades ever. And he won a World Series there. Like it sucks that he never brought a World Series to Detroit, but I'm very happy that he got to win a World Series regardless of where it was. Regardless, he was only a 20-year-old at the time who, still he hit a walk-off home run in his major league debut. Right, like that happened. He hit a home run off Roger Clemens in the World Series at age 20. Um, the world should have known then if they didn't.
Yeah, for sure. Like that was crazy as a 20-year-old to do that against such a legendary pitcher who is still, pretty much in his prime with Roger Clemens. And yeah, in a big series, and yeah, like was part of the reason they were able to win that World Series. At such an improbable team to be able to win that World Series. I'm trying to pull up like what he did in those playoffs, although I'm not sure. Yeah, in that World Series it wasn't great, but in the NLCS he had a 1027 OPS against the Cubs in a 7-game series. Like big reason why they were able to go to the World Series. Yeah, pretty crazy career here.
Yeah, it's You know, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think we all know this.
Mhm.
And it was cool, I will say, you know, just off of my firsthand experience, seeing in his last week as a major leaguer, like the clear impact that he had on the city of Detroit, even with, you know, the fun Miguel Cabrera memories kind of faded after 2016-ish. Uh, that was the year where like the Tigers almost made the playoffs, but they just missed. And after that, it was a bunch of, you know, uninspiring teams. Miggy very clearly showing his age, starting at age 34 pretty much. But, you know, regardless of all that, like everyone was just there to see him. You
Mhm.
know, it's very clear the impact he made on that city. Um, through all the 16 years that he played there. Um, and they actually just rehired him as a special assistant of baseball operations, I believe. So he'll still be working with the team. Um, it was very cool to see everything that happened this weekend with like his kids like announcing him when he came up to the plate, with him going out to first base in the eighth inning and getting that play before getting taken out. The ball just, of course, found him.
Yep. Yeah, it
Even
was.
on almost beat that ball out too, which would have been awful.
Yeah, it was pretty. It was a pretty good moment. Luckily, the season was able to end at Comerica Park in front of the home
Mm,
crowd.
yeah.
Um, you know, give something to end the season well on.
It's
And
one of those. I think it's one of those things where it's like you kind of forget about the season ending in that moment.
yeah,
Like no, you know, no one's thinking about the game that the fact that there's not a game tomorrow, that there's not a game next week, there's not a game for 6 months. Everyone's kind of just happy to be there to celebrate. You know, the turning of a page of one of the most memorable eras in Detroit Tigers history.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Definitely agree on that. I mean, anything more on the Miguel Cabrera uh retirement here?
I think that was kind of it. I mean, you know, if you watch baseball during the early 2010s, you remember the era where if you tried to say anyone was a better hitter than Miguel Cabrera, you were wrong. And there was just nothing else to say there.
Exactly, exactly. Um, and another player that was on the Major League Baseball field as a player for the last time this past weekend was Adam Wainwright, a 200 game winner. Uh, known for some really quality postseason success. Was the guy that got the last out in the 2006 World Series against the Tigers, and yeah, like another very good career. Will be remembered by his franchise as well, very fondly. What were your thoughts on Adam Wainwright's career and impact on the Cardinals?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Cardinals have had this weird transitional period the last couple of years where, you know, Pujols retired with them, Yadier Molina retired with them, and now Wainwright was kind of the last piece to go. And obviously this year was not one to remember outside of the retirement, um, you know, on the stat sheet, but he did get his 200th win, which was big. You know, everyone was rooting for it. And I think people are also just going to remember that, you know, he was kind of going into until his 40s. I mean, he had a 3.66 FIP last year, and 191 innings pitched too. Like he was a good pitcher at age 40. And he got hurt to start this year, which may have had something to do with it. But, you know, I think we're going to remember Adam Wainwright as a guy who, you know, fought until the very end. Um, you know, a solid pitcher for the Cardinals for 18 years. A guy who unfortunately had to miss a World Series because of Tommy John surgery, but who came back even stronger than before, right? I mean, Cy Young runner-up in 2013, third in 2014. Uh, you know, obviously a champion as a closer with them early on in his career, but um, you know, no doubt an icon in Cardinals history and a guy that really fits, you know, the like what the organization has been known to be about throughout its history.
Yeah, and as cliche as it is to say, but in the free agency era to have a guy play 18 years with one team is
Mm.
pretty special.
Yeah,
Pretty special that the Cardinals were able to keep him around for so long. Such a high quality pitcher for that long, and he was able to, yeah, as you mentioned, able to succeed for a while. He won, you know, not to lighten it up too much, but he won 2021 Christian to Snowballer of the Year, because he was doing it. He had 206 innings and a 3.05 ERA, in his age 39 season. It was something special to see. Like he got Cy Young votes in his age 39 season. Like that's something to admire there. Just kept it going till the end. This year wasn't his best, but I mean, there weren't really any years like that, any other years like that in his career. He kept it going, and it didn't really like whether or not he did what he did. The Cardinals would be kind of in the same spot no matter what. So that does lighten things up a bit. He didn't really cost. I wouldn't say he really cost the Cardinals anything in his last year. But yeah, as far as his career goes, I mean, 18 years with one team is very good. The postseason success and the clutch factor, like I'll always remember like that 2013 Game 5 complete game against the Pirates to advance them to the NLCS, a year in which they went to the World Series and were 2 wins away from winning it. And yeah, a 2.83 career playoff ERA in 114 innings pitched is pretty nuts. Like one of the more clutch pitchers in the wild card era when there are more playoffs. Like he came out and more often than not was very successful in the postseason.
Yeah. A guy that, I think, I mean, by the way, also, we never talked about him as a hitter. Silver Slugger Award winner in 2017. He got an at bat over the weekend, and let's just forget rate stats because he's a pitcher. He had 143 career hits. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Don't mind rate stats. Pitchers aren't supposed to be hitters. 143 base hits in his career, 39 doubles, 10 home runs, 2 triples. Triple in 2016. When did he triple in 2016? I gotta check that out. Yeah, I mean, one of the last solid hitting pitchers that the sport ever got to see.
Yeah, he was able to get 4.4 offensive wins above replacement in his career, which is quite a bit for a pitcher. Like that's based on him versus other pitchers. That's what offensive WAR is.
Yeah.
But so that means he in his career he got 4 more wins through his batting than your average pitcher would get in as a hitter. That's pretty nuts. Like he was a very good hitter. A lot of why his wins above replacement is increased is because
Positive.
of his hitting. Because
adjustments,
because his B-WAR, his overall B-WAR on when you go to his baseball reference page, it's 44.9, and some of that has to do with his hitting because it accounts for total wins above replacement. So yeah, he was a very good hitting pitcher, like not an automatic out, which most pitchers are, obviously, during that era. But yeah. All right, should we get into our final little tribute?
Yeah, let's do it. This one really hurts. This one is much different.
Yeah, this is a bit somber. Tim Wakefield, former pitcher for the Pirates and most notably the Red Sox. He passed away from brain cancer at the age of 57. And yeah, I mean, very, very known within the Red Sox organization, very known within the city of Boston for a lot of charitable work that he did. He won a Roberto Clemente Award in 2010, which obviously accounts for on-field and especially off-field performance and what he did with the city and his charitable work. It's an extremely sad. Yesterday was an extremely sad day for anybody who follows the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, Tim Wakefield, most known for being a knuckleball pitcher, 19 years in the big league, 2-time World Series champion, both in 2004 and 2007. When I was in high school, I read his book, his biography it was for school. I don't remember what the actual project was, but I read his his book, and the thing that stood out to me the most is just the way that the city backed him up because of the way he backed the city up. He wrote in his book about giving up the home run to Aaron Boone in 2003 that sent the Yankees to the World Series and extended the Red Sox curse another 1 year. And he walked off the mound after that, was very emotional, thought that he was going to be known as like the next Bill Buckner. And that never happened. People were, I think if you talk to any Red Sox fans about like their thoughts on Tim Wakefield giving up the home run, they'll be like, yeah, he did it, but this and this and this, right? Because he pitched very well in that series. He pitched on the Red Sox for 17 years. Like you mentioned, a lot of charitable work done to the community, and just a guy that I think the entire city of Boston was happy to have as a representative of them for so many years.
Yeah, the more I'm looking into it, the he was an honorary chairman of the Red Sox Foundation and a captain or a Red Sox team captain of the Jimmy Fund, which the Jimmy Fund is known to raise funds for cancer research, based out of Boston. So, yeah, I mean, he was, obviously known as a pitcher, a 200 game winner. I had the honor of going to his 199th win back in 2011 and witnessing his 2000th strikeout with the Red Sox. Not for career, but with the Red Sox. And yeah, I mean, Boston loved him and loved him for good reason. He did quality work on the field and even a lot off the field as well.
It is beyond a tragedy that he has gone so soon, only 57 years old, into brain cancer as well. Just a devastating way to go out. There's been a lot of former teammates of his, both with the Pirates and the Red Sox, that have spoken out, whether it be on social media, whether it be through interviews. And, I think it's said, we can talk a lot about, what Tim Wakefield meant to the game of baseball, to us personally as baseball fans. But, I think anything that you hear from his former teammates, from people who, were around him during his baseball career, like I think they would tell you everything that you need to know.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like everything you would perceive about him as a fan is really true. And yeah, unfortunately, this all kind of happened all very suddenly. I mean, he was on the NESN broadcasts, this past summer,
Mhm.
doing the pre and post game shows and sometimes in game commentary up in the booth with Dave O'Brien. Yeah, like unfortunately, all very sudden. And yeah, I mean, I imagine there was more stuff he was going to do off the field, but unfortunately, that'll have to be carried on in other ways. So, yeah, a real unfortunate death to the Red Sox community, baseball community, his charitable community, and hopefully the rest of us can pick up the slack there. So, yeah, anything more before we close out the episode?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, that shall do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, the playoff previews, players to highlight, our narratives and stuff, and also how we had to end the show. So if you were listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed. Follow us on social media. Follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gian, to follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Kern, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you. We hope to see you next time, where we will be recapping the wildcard series and previewing the ALDSs and NLDSs. See you next time.
This conversation is over.